First, I want to welcome you to the fourth and final day of the 10th Annual Summit on Volunteerism and Civic Engagement. It really has been our honor and privilege to be able to bring these workshops directly to you using the Zoom virtual platform. Like most folks, as COVID was hitting about a year ago, we started to wonder, what will this look like for our summit? It's such a well-attended event and so necessary for folks. And with the changing climate, it felt even more important to be able to bring some of these presentations and trainings to folks in the volunteerism space so that they can continue to offer really quality opportunities for volunteers and services to the community. I would love to introduce to you our two speakers today, and they are Mike Hauser and Amy Parrott from the U of A Cooperative Extension. Mike has worked for more than 25 years as the 4-H Youth Development Agent in Apache County for the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. In addition to overseeing and managing traditional 4-H programs, he has developed an ongoing 4-H summer camp program, camp counselor training program, and an annual Hiking the Grand Canyon experience. I will need some details on that, Mike, because I would love to participate. He enjoys working with all ages of youth and engaging youth in positive learning experiences. Amy Parrott is a 4-H youth development agent in Yuma, Arizona, where she has worked since 2001. While she loves working with all ages and stages, her passion is working with teens. Amy has an active AG in the classroom program. Did I read that right?
Well, just agriculture, like
agriculture. Got it. That connects young people with hands-on science and increases their appreciation for living in the agricultural community. I get it now, ag community. The best part of her job is that she learns something new every day. That's one of my favorite things about my job as well. Welcome, Amy and Mike, and we will turn it over to you all for about the next hour, 15 minutes.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having us. Mike and I are both very excited to be here with you this morning. We have a lot of history with this particular conference. We've always loved the participants, the energy that people bring, and so we're very excited to be able to be with you this morning. So thank you. I don't know if you have anything you want to add, Mike.
Ditto. I've enjoyed presenting, enjoyed attending, and excited for the day.
Perfect. Can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. So we're just gonna kind of jump right on in. The title of our presentation is How to Wow, and we're hoping to give you a couple of really great ideas that you can incorporate either into a workspace, into an organization that you work with, whether it's Scouts, church, even in your own home. There might be a couple of ways to bring some of our ideas in for today. And so really, as we go, please stop us if you have questions, either raise your hand, unmute, go in the chat box. We would love for this to be as interactive as possible. So please stop us as we progress. But really, we appreciate everybody being here this morning.
So out of the gate, what we'd like to do is get you involved, get you thinking of some different things. What I need is everybody to find a piece of paper, preferably an 8.5 by 11 sheet of blank paper or notebook paper or anything that you can write on, and a pen. So I need a paper and a pen for everybody to get if they can, please. I'll give you another couple seconds to get a pen and paper, and then I am going to give you some instructions. And if you would follow my instructions, and at the end, we have a few things. If you want to show off your paper at the end, we can visit a little bit about that. So if everybody has a piece of paper and a pen, I'd like you to close your eyes and keep your eyes closed while I give the following instructions. Okay, the first thing I'd like you to do on this blank piece of paper with your eyes closed is in the center of the paper, draw a picture of a house. On the right side, draw a tree. On the left side, draw 3 flowers.
Get it to the screen.
Add 2 windows to the house. Draw grass in the front yard. Add a door to the front of your house. Draw 4 birds flying by the house. Attach a mailbox in the front yard. And finally, draw a chimney on the roof. Now, open your eyes and look at your piece of art. Look at what you have drawn. Is there anybody bold enough to want to put it in front of the screen and show everybody else what your picture looks like? I know it's hard with some of the things to see the detail on that, but you can get some idea of just how each have been. As I make my screen bigger,
some of those are really impressive.
Very good. Now the thought behind that, or the things, is everybody had the exact same instructions, but no 2 of them are alike, obviously. So a couple of the principles is the diversity or the uniqueness that we all have. Easy to see how we all are unique and all have our own talents, but all have our own uniqueness, which is a great quality of us to have the uniqueness. The other point to bring up to this is that everybody had the exact same instructions. It was on equal ground. Everybody had the exact same instructions, but many times it's our interpretation of those instructions that is the difference. And when we begin to talk about group interaction, group dynamics, group communication, how we interact with one another, we all hear the same instructions. We all hear the same presentation. We all hear the same things, but it's our interpretation of those instructions or the directions that set us apart, or that create that uniqueness. And so as we go throughout the day today, we just want to be able to remind you about our presentation, our uniqueness, and in How to Wow, there are some factors that we hope to create today, as well as some resources with which to give you at the end of the day about some of the unique ways that you can create this How to Wow environment.
Perfect. Wow. Well, thank you for being brave enough to participate with a closed eye assignment as our second slide. So we appreciate that. But really, Mike just sort of kicks off, there is no right or wrong answer. So just kind of keep that in mind as we proceed with our presentation, because we deal with people who come to our organizations or our workplace wherever they're at. And so everybody's perspective needs to be valued. And so that's part of why we wanted you to sort of start off with that one. So basically what we're going to be talking about, and what we just did is an icebreaker. And I'm sure we've all done icebreakers. We come to a meeting, we fill out a questionnaire, you do things like that. But are they just like little things that we give people so that the late people, we don't have to repeat everything? Or is it a deliberate component to a meeting? And so for Mike and I, it's very, very intentional. And so why are icebreakers important? Well, first of all, they're fun. I mean, it's meant to start off a meeting or a gathering in a fun way and sort of have a little bit of a break from whatever task you're doing. If you're a scout leader, it's a great way to sort of bring people back. If it's a work function, it's a great way to bring people back from lunch. Also, it breaks down, it can easily break down barriers that exist between people, especially employees. Now more than ever in the digital world and where everybody's working remote, people tend to work in silos. And so you are with your team, you do things with your team, and especially if you're not in an office, you don't necessarily interact with that many people outside of your team. And so this is a great way to get different departments, different positions, different levels of people working together. And nothing is better than that in an organization than getting all levels of people, whether it's the janitor, whether it's the CEO, put everybody on an equal playing field, because as we said, everybody brings something to the organization. Also, they could really help kickstart major meetings or long training sessions. And we're definitely going to maybe kind of discourage some of the longer training sessions. Those aren't always the best, sort of way to spend your time. But if you know that you're coming to like a brainstorming meeting that's going to be 2 hours just talking about how to whittle the budget down on an annual barbecue, everybody's kind of like, oh, get your coffee. This might not be fun. Well, if you start with something fun and putting everybody in a teamwork mode, it might be a different way of changing the attitude of the team just by a 5 or 10 minute exercise with your coworkers or teammates. It also makes it easier to communicate with one another, especially if you don't communicate with each other all that often. Again, Mike just had everybody's on the same playing field. Everybody got the same instructions. Nobody's picture was right or wrong. Everybody did exactly what he asked. And so it can sometimes break down barriers when you're not necessarily used to talking to the boss or talking to another team. This is a great way to do that. And then it encourages interactions that normally might not exist. Again, bringing everybody to the table, because we really do believe that everybody might not always be at the table, but everybody deserves a chance to be at the table. And so we just feel like icebreakers are much more than a time sponge. It's much more of a, people in Arizona are always 10 minutes late. Let's start with it. No. For us, they're very intentional and very deliberate. And even the ones that we choose, we try to be very intentional with the point of them. And so Mike is going to demonstrate another type of icebreaker right now. So you don't need a pen and paper for this one.
In the chat box, Carol and Amy mentioned 2 truths and a lie, and how much fun and is that? And that's one that we have used a number of times. I would echo what Amy said about the intentionality, is that the more intentional you are with the more specific objectives you have, the more engaging that can be. Okay, so now I'm going to read a scenario and you're going to take a poll, and I'm going to explain to you what personality type you may be based on the selection that you make. So I'm going to paint a picture for you. A plain white coffee mug of your own design sits ready for the kiln in front of you and is staring at you in blank anticipation. You have chosen to use blue glaze. Now, if only you could decide on the pattern. Which of the following patterns do you paint on the mug? Do you paint stripes, polka dots, checks, or checkerboard, or wavy lines? So what we'd like to do is pull up the poll if possible and have you select which of the, which design best to fit your way you would paint that. And then I'll explain why, what your choice means.
Looks like about 65% of you have voted.
while you're finishing up, let me set the stage a little further. Blue is the color most deeply associated with the inner workings of the mind, from imagination to intuition to intellect. The white surface of your coffee mug provides a blank slate and gives you your mind free rein to express itself in the most comfortable, natural way. In this sense, the pattern you selected reflects the structure and strengths of your mind and its approach to creativity and problem solving. So it looks like wavy lines was the _1 answer. So if you selected wavy lines, your gift is generating an atmosphere, in which it's easy and comfortable to feel and express love. It is not that you crave attention or affection. Number 2 was polka dots. Polka dots means that your strength lies in the adaptive, artistic nature of your mind. This makes you appear to be a little offbeat, perhaps even eccentric to some. But you make a real contribution to the world as a creator with a unique vision. Stripes, you favor a direct and clear approach, making you a keen decision maker to resolve problems and put plans into action instantly. It's only natural that people perceive you as a leader and pillar of strength. And finally, checks. Last but not least, you excel at mastering the demands of the everyday, but in no way does that make you average or ordinary. Few people are able to organize their lives with such quiet efficiency. I'm just curious if anybody would like to unmute and share whether they think that this little activity created or gave them some affirmation of what they are, or was even the opposite of what was described. Just out of curiosity, anybody want to share what they thought of this little activity?
I thought it was perfect.
Okay, that's great to hear. That's great to know. Anybody else?
I thought it was great too. I had polka dots, and I'm on the side a professional photographer, and very reflective.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Even more, in a small group or in your setting with which you come from, do you think if you took this activity back to your group, to your community with which you engage in, and you presented this, do you think that this would be an intentional way to create some dialogue, to either give it the sort of the thumbs up or the explanation that, no, this isn't what I really am, but more importantly is, this doesn't say what I am, but here is what I think I am. And you then begin to have this open and more engaging dialogue on something that I don't know. I haven't done the research and know the actual ability of whether these things are true. And I don't think that's the most important, in my opinion. I think the most important is from our presentation today is the ability to go back and engage your colleagues, your friends, your group about what the discussion that follows, I think, is the most important. Anything else before we move on? Great, thank you for your participation.
Really, we appreciate it. So that leads us to talk a little bit, wait, sorry, let me shut this. Okay, perfect. So that leads us to talk a little bit more about morale. And ultimately, we are trying to help you all increase the morale of wherever you are going or wherever you're coming from. So if you're here because of your work, if you're here because of an organization that you volunteer with, and really it could be Scouts, it could be church, it could be 4-H, girls, it doesn't matter what. At the end of the day, you have generally committed quite a bit of time, or you are paid to work with people who have committed quite a bit of time to volunteer with a specific organization. And so nobody wants that time to feel wasted. And you certainly don't want to dread going into meetings with people or certain partnerships that you have. And so does morale really matter? And Mike and I would argue, yes, it matters a great deal. And so one of the big ways that it matters is improved productivity. If we're talking about this from a work standpoint, that ultimately trickles down to dollars and cents. If I'm productive, the university got their money's worth. If I'm shopping online all day, the university did not get their money out of me. And so like ultimately we want productivity and the time that we're dedicating to a specific project to be well worth it. So we believe that improved productivity, when morale is high, everybody works well and they work well together. It can also improve how well the participants engage. If Mike and I came on and said, you know, welcome, we had to do this for work. So watch our slides. Nobody, you know, people are going to turn off their camera. They're going to disengage. They're going to see what's happening with Facebook. And so we feel like if you are engaged, if you are, if people are excited to be there, you're much more likely to show kind of enthusiasm. And then I also think you'll find people arrive early or stay late. And so they're much more willing, whether it's an employee or a volunteer, they're much more willing to take on more to get the job done, which ultimately helps your organization. If a volunteer is heading up a major fundraising effort and they're willing to come 2 hours early and stay 2 hours late to help your organization raise this money, that's priceless. And so ultimately we feel like if you can create this atmosphere of like really a high morale within the space, that ultimately it's a win-win for your organization. We also believe it improves performance and creativity, excuse me. Generally, individuals perform better when morale is high. And so a good example, try holding a brainstorming meeting to solve a problem when morale is high. And you'll be amazed at how people just throw ideas out the window. And that's when you want to be doing it, when everybody feels like there's no dumb idea. We've all been to meetings where, you know, somebody says there's no dumb idea, but you feel like I can't say anything unless I know what other people are saying. Hold the same meeting with a team that's really bored or right after lunch. That's the kiss of death. Nobody wants to do anything at 1:30. Like, so a 1:30 brainstorming meeting about how we can totally revamp our logo. Never gonna happen. Like, I mean, Mike and I aren't geniuses, but like never gonna happen. It doesn't matter how high your morale is, but like if you're trying to do that with a group that's like very bored, inattentive, it just drags on. And then you usually have 2 or 3 meetings for the same thing. So hopefully if you have created this environment of like a really, it doesn't always have to be exciting, but where you could make simple tasks exciting, a lot of times that can be attributed to high morale. Also attention to detail. That's kind of one that it slips past me a lot of times, but I pay attention to the tiny little details. When staff really enjoy the work, they pay attention to all those things. They don't send out a $1,000 mailing. One really good example, and I'm going to tattle on myself. I have done a presentation similar to this, and in every single slide, you'll notice it says, does morale really matter? Well, Mike, my favorite coworker, I had misspelled morale. I had just said moral. And so I was so excited about the presentation. Like, oh, I had on my sassy pants. I was like, this is amazing. I am like, this is basically a cure for cancer. And he's like, there's a typo. Like, I just, so again, like my own morale was good, but I had a typo and I did a major presentation. And I don't know, it was a little embarrassing. Luckily, we fixed that. And we know now that we're talking about morale rather than moral. But yeah, so when morale is high, people pay attention to those details. And there's a big difference between moral and morale. And so we feel like it could potentially help you not make the same mistakes that, that I've made and we've all made. It also provides a safe space, a safe organization. People pay attention. There's a lot of organizations that they have rules, especially anytime you're working with youth, there's policies for a reason. When you come to an organization that you know the policies are going to be adhered to, well, most of us feel much safer. You know that your job is secure. You know that what you're doing is secure. You know that there are very clear policies and expectations, not just from you, but also from the participant. And so you can put a lot more focus on whatever the task is rather than, you know, are people going to be social distancing? Are adults going to be making sure that it's an 8-to-1 ratio? And so when you have high morale and people are really kind of paying attention to policies and things like that, ultimately you feel safer and you can focus all of your time and energy on getting the task done rather than on all of these outlying time sponges, which ultimately sometimes they take up more time than the task in general. The next one is increased quality of work. Finally, the task itself becomes, ultimately, that's what everyone's here for. I keep using this fundraiser as an example, but if ultimately you have one task and it's to put on this fundraiser that will fund your organization for an entire year, you don't need to come to the meeting every single time and discuss what happened 3 months ago. You need to come and be excited. Okay, what are the napkins gonna look like? Who's doing the tickets? Do we have talent that's going to be coming? What are the thank yous going to look like? You don't, well, last year my plate, you know, I just didn't like it and the line was too long and I had to park. Nobody wants to rehash what happened last year. And so ultimately, if the morale is high, you're excited about what's coming. And ultimately, we feel like that helps negate negative behavior. It's human nature to kind of bring up negative things that have happened because you want to prevent it from happening to somebody else. But when all you do is rehash what happened 3 years ago, nobody cares. Like some of us weren't here. So whatever happened in 2015, I didn't get the reimbursement and nobody cares, you know? So let's just focus on doing this amazing fundraiser. Let's focus on the popcorn sales, the Girl Scout cookies. Let's focus on Sunday school this weekend. Just focus on what we're doing rather than what has happened in the past, because we can't change that. We can learn from it, but let's just have a positive attitude about what we're going to be leading into. So, okay, are we good so far on why morale is important? Yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna do another little icebreaker.
Wait, these actually come from a couple of books and a program, a process called Cocology. Is that right, Amy?
Yes, I should have brought the books, but they're sitting on my desk at home. But I will share. We'll share the books at the end.
Yeah, one of the things we hope to spend some time with at the end is talking about resources. I don't know that it's the lecture time we give here I think can be great, can have some interaction, but at the end of the day, our hope is that you take away we provide some resources that we are able to put in your hands, some materials, some information, some things that you can be intentional with when you go back to your organization. And so here's another one of those Cocology things. Let me set the scenario and then I'll have you choose your one and then I'll describe what that means of you. This one, of course, is called Caught in the Rain. Not everything in life is predictable. We're always getting hit by surprises, emergencies, and unforeseen disasters without any chance to prepare ourselves mentally. So surprises of any kind can be stressful. There are too many things we can't predict or control. That's one of the reasons we all tend to develop habits and patterns to live by. Here's your scenario. You're outside walking when a hard rain suddenly begins to fall. Even if you run full speed, you're still about 5 minutes from your destination. Which of the following best describes your choice of action? Number one, I'll find an awning or tree to stand under and wait for the rain to stop. 2, I don't know how long it's going to keep raining, so I'll run to where I'm going to as fast as I can. Number 3, I'd see if there's anyone around with an umbrella I could share, or a store where I can buy one. And number 4, I always have a folding umbrella in my bag when I go out, so I'll just use that. So if we can bring the poll up, you can vote on whether you want to find whether your personality or your type is to find cover, keep walking or running in the rain, find somebody to get under an umbrella with, or you have one in your bag.
I would like to be the Arizonan that always carries an umbrella in their bag.
There are a number of them, Amy. There's 11 Arizonans who carry an umbrella in their bag all the time. Okay, if I can. Okay, here are the results. So how do you respond to a sudden downpour? The rainstorm represents unforeseeable and uncontrollable forces in your life. Specifically, your answer shows how you would tend to react when a fight breaks out between you and a loved one or a friend. Number one. Oh, let's do number 2 first.
Yes.
Number 2 says, you don't care about the end result of a fight so much as to getting to speak your mind. You're sure you're right, and there's no sense arguing the point. The concept of a give and take doesn't figure into your tactics. If you get angry, if they get angry, you get angrier. Number 1, I'll find an awning or tree to stand under. You're the type who waits from the outside in a fight to You're the type who waits for the other side in a fight to cool off before you try to settle your differences. You prefer to let them rant and rave until they run out of steam, then present your case calmly and objectively. Number 4, you think you have an answer to every accusation, a justification for every fault. To you, an argument may just be a chance to hone your skills at debate, but to others, you seem slippery, frustrating, and insincere. And finally, number 3, you don't like conflict and confrontation, so you try to smooth things over and calm the other person down whenever a fight breaks out. Unfortunately, sometimes that only makes things worse. So as with the first one, and as you have probably thought of yourself as you've gone through this, and as you have compared yourself to the answer you gave versus the other answers that were read, is there anybody that would like to share not what response they had necessarily, but how they interpret this and how they engage with this activity? Any thoughts that people had on this?
I chose find cover. And the reason I did was because you said my destination was still 5 minutes away. And so I thought, okay, well, if I run, I might fall. So I better look for some safety somewhere. And so that's kind of why I chose that one.
Well, great. It's always great to hear the response or the thought process behind that and why we do certain things, which is obviously one of the reasons that we made that decision, is we process and we say, this is what I did because of this situation. And so thank you very much for sharing that and the thought process behind that. Is that pretty accurate? Can I pick on you, Kathy? Is that pretty accurate? You think of your description or not so much?
Yeah, because of 5 minutes. Otherwise, I'd run.
Okay.
I thought 5 minutes in a downpour, that's still a long ways to go. So in my mind, the safest thing for me at my age would to be find cover. And so otherwise, I'd probably take a chance and run.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you for sharing. Others? Anybody else want to share? Yes. Raven.
I just don't think we could hear you, Raven. I'm sorry. Was I the only one who couldn't hear?
No, I could not hear either.
Me either.
Okay, sorry. I know what she had to say was cool.
This is uncanny because even though I have an umbrella in my car all the time, I don't use it. I find cover, and it's uncanny that the way I handle a fight is to let people. I don't think this is something that a lot of people know about me, but I let other people blow off steam before I say anything.
Okay, and is that so? What you picked was representative of your personality or how you handle a conflict. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. Very good.
This was hard to answer when you live in California because you're hardly ever caught in the rain.
Same in most of Arizona too, isn't it? So there's a whole lot of these cocology ones. We selected a couple of them. Again, I'll reiterate that I think it's great conversation, but I think one of the great parts of this is the dialogue that would happen after you took the little quiz with your colleagues or with your group of not necessarily is it correct or not, does it represent me or not? But I was interested in those 4 answers and the differences of those 4 answers. And I, in my own self, analyzed, well, so what situation would I be in? Okay, depend on this conflict, as whether I would sort of run or fight or flight, or how I would respond. And I think that's an important part of being intentional and learning about the personality and about the responses of and who your colleagues are and how you can then interact with them, which I think leads us to some of the next section, or our last section, with regards to in the workforce, in the groups that we volunteer in, and the different types that we have. You ready, Amy?
Perfect. Okay, let's get going. Well, I hate to say unprecedented times, but because I feel like it's been a little overused, but I can honestly say these are completely unprecedented times. For the first time ever in our history, we have had 5 generations in the workplace. So, okay, sorry. We've had 5 generations in the workplace. Never before has that happened. And who knows how long that will last, or if it happens again. But really, really important to keep that in mind, not just in our workplaces, but also in our organizations. Remember, we started this whole thing saying like everybody brings something to the table, everybody should be valued, everybody needs to be respected. And so in the past, we've had a couple of maybe 2 or 3 generations, or even like in some offices, the age range is maybe only 20 years between, all 10 or 15 employees. But really, I think this is something that kind of needs to, we need to address, just because it is here, it's happening. And especially Arizona, we know that it's happening more so than in some places. So for the sake of, I know there's all sorts of names that we call the different generations, but for the sake of today, the builder generation, they tend to be ages 71 and older. Baby boomer are 52 to 70. Generation X is 37 to 51. We have Gen Y, they're 22 to 36. And then Gen Z is age 7 to 21. So just for the sake of today, that's what we're going to be calling everybody. And it's really important, I think, before we start a discussion about multi-generationalism, everybody generally tends to get their hackles up a little bit. And it's like, oh, what are they going to say about me? Everybody is valuable, everybody's important. And so it's very easy. We all see the memes about Gen Z, they fold paper clips during the day and they're looking for an $8 million home, and so we see the same thing about baby boomers. And so I just think it's really important to kind of go into it with a really open mind that we're not poking at any of them. Every generation has laid the foundation for where we are today. And so we're not going to be poking fun at anybody. And we've all seen the memes. We're not going to share them today, although we do have a lot of really good ones. But we just wanted to kind of bring up a couple of stereotypes that make it a little bit easier. What's up, Mike?
I just have to comment on TJ's chat. I just realized yesterday I'm old enough to be one of my best workmates' mom. So right there is a perfect example of in the workplace or in the environment with which somebody is in, they realized just yesterday that they are have a workmate who is they could be the mom of a workmate.
See, that's an eye opener, because all of a sudden it's like, I don't necessarily have an issue with my age. I have twin niece and nephews that are 13, and I always lie about my age. And it wasn't until just a couple of years ago that they realized that the math doesn't add up. And so all of a sudden they're like, you're old. You take that back. But there's nothing wrong. Every age brings something to the groups that we're at. But it is sometimes a little jarring when you realize something like you could be one of your coworkers' parents. So we're just going to kind of talk really briefly about some of the stereotypes that go with the different generations. Okay, so for the most part, people tend to think that builders are very old-fashioned, they're practical, they follow the rules. Baby boomers tend to be ambitious, maybe wealthy. Gen X is selfish, cynical. Why does this keep doing that? is this the first one? Sorry, I'm sorry. Then Gen Y, they tend to be job hoppers. They have a different job every 30 minutes. They work to live. And then we have the Gen Z, who they're constantly connected and multitaskers. And so these are just some very broad generalizations about these specific generations, which a couple of them will really come in handy. These are some, again, broad about core values. Builders tend to have a ton of respect for authority. So if the boss says we're doing A, B, and C, absolutely, A, B, and C, that's what we're doing. They're dutiful, and who keeps forwarding this? They're dutiful, and like they definitely fall back on customs. They are the ones who have kept traditions going. Some of the baby boomers, they are very optimistic. They have just a very optimistic and tolerant attitude about it. They tend to be called workaholics. And so that's one of their traits. Gen Xers, they are very self-reliant and skeptical. So that's, you know, I don't know if that's a positive or a negative, but that's something that tends to pop up quite often when you talk about Gen X. When you talk about Gen Y, they're very goal-focused. They definitely are purpose-driven. They do things for a reason. And then we talk about Gen Z, and they are unique. They're creating their own jobs or creating their own companies. They're creative, and that's just tends to be how they look at some of their core values that they bring to our organization or our workplace. Work ethic. This is really helpful, especially if you have coworkers or even in the organizations that we're working with. When we're talking about work ethic for builders, they will be there. They're the first ones there, the last ones to leave. They will be there until the job gets done. Baby boomers. The stereotype is that they tend to be self-centered. Like, okay, I'm doing this committee. I'm in charge. Let me report back to me. They also tend to question authority, where the builders in the past haven't always done that. Gen Xers tend to be very task-oriented. So give them a task, give them a job, and they will take it and run. Also self-reliant, and they definitely want to balance between work and family. They do not live to work. I wouldn't say that they work to live either, but they do not work to live. Did I get this mixed up? They do not live to work.
Got it right the first time.
Sorry, I get myself confused. Gen Y, they're multitaskers. They always want to know what's next. Okay, I'm almost done with this. What's next? And so you kind of have to, if you have employees like this, you have to know that. They're also very eager, and sometimes it's like, simmer down, like let's do something really well, and then I'll get you to your next task. But they're just excited. And then Gen Z, they're flexible, self-reliant, and they demand quite a bit of personal freedom. So those are just some kind of things to keep in your back pocket when you're working with these types of people. And again, none of this is right or wrong, and it's not a hard and fast rule, but if you kind of go into it knowing, okay, maybe this is how I need to address this specific group, it will save you a lot of headache at the end. Communication styles. I find this to be the most helpful. And the reason I got into multi-generational, well, I just got really interested in it. When I first started, I was hands down the youngest person at my office, and the secretaries were considerably older than me, and I didn't like my job. I felt like no matter what I did, it was wrong. I felt like I was always pushing a boulder up the hill. And we had a conference in Durango, like in 2008. And there was a gentleman there who talked about multi-generational studies and multi-generational workplaces, and how if you could learn how other people communicate with you and kind of meet them where they're at, it will make your life so much easier. And let me tell you that I'll never forget sitting in that conference room at the Marriott in Durango. It totally changed my professional direction, because I realized, okay, I'm not the know-it-all here. Like, who cares that you just graduated, and nobody cares. Like, no one cares that you have all these amazing ideas if you can't communicate and work with other people in your office. And so the communication skills is one that I use to this day. And Mike and I both work with 4-H. So sometimes we have 90-year-old 4-H leaders or master gardeners, and then we have 5-year-old 4-H members. And so we work the gamut. And if I could give one piece of information or one tip, like really learn and appreciate and incorporate communication styles into your everyday life. Builders, they want things, nothing goes further than a handwritten thank you note. They don't want you to take them to lunch. They don't want a plaque. They write them a handwritten thank you note, and they will be there forever. Baby boomers tend to, they call them, say, hey, that was you did a great job. Me personally, I hate to talk on the phone. If someone calls me, I assume they're on their way to the ER. So, but with baby boomers, pick up the phone and have a conversation with them. Talk to them one-on-one. When we get to the Gen Xers, they like something very direct, and a lot of times email, like, hey, great job on the fundraiser this weekend. You knocked it out of the park. Or even not like a congratulations or a thank you, just with normal communication. When we get to the Gen Y, they definitely like text message, just text them like, hey, when are you coming to work? Are we going to see you this week? Same thing with social media. A lot of times you find out a lot more about them by their Instagram account than you would in a 2-day trading where we're getting to know each other. And then when we talk about Gen Z, again, don't forget they're digital natives. They have been born and raised with a smartphone. None of those flip phone. I mean, they came out of the womb with, the latest version of Apple. And so you kind of have to be mindful that that's where they're at. And I will tell you, especially with regards to communication, the gentleman who was doing the conference, who was presenting the conference in Durango, he happened to be a baby boomer, and he had several like Gen Xers and Gen Zers that worked with him. And so one of the examples he gave is he would spend like the morning working on a 3 or 4 paragraph email and then send it to all his staff and then run down the hall and say, hey, I just emailed you, did you get it? Well, what's the point of you emailing if you're going to run down the hall and then tell me? Well, he would get so frustrated because he would spend, 3 hours on this 4 paragraph email, and then his employees would say, got it, gotcha, I'll be there, thumbs up. And he would be livid because here he spends hours, and ultimately he wasn't asking them for like, let me know what you want to do here. They were acknowledging it, like, okay, got it. And so he kind of explained how it would cost so much, he would get so upset. And then his coworkers are like, I got your email. Why are you running down the hall to check that I got your email? Like, send a carrier pigeon, I got it. Like, and so again, it's just like sometimes these confusing things that happen, but it's just because we communicate differently. And then again, my way isn't the right way. Their way isn't the right way, but we have to meet each other on a level playing field. And so sometimes if you can just figure out how to communicate with each other, I really do think people come into organizations and into workplaces to want to be heard, to want to be seen. They don't mean to be this complicated, but again, like they bring a lot of, the term baggage sometimes has a negative connotation, but we all bring our own experiences with us. So if we can just communicate with each other in a way that is the most comfortable with us, I feel like our organization, especially our workplaces, will be much more successful for it. And then feedback. This is sort of a good one as well. I've learned the hard way, especially as a supervisor, how people want feedback. Generally the builders, no news is good news. You don't need to have a meeting about like all the great things they did. If you are talking to them, it's because there's an issue and you're fixing it. And they really take pride in a job well done. The builders were really the ones who they started at Ford, and they spent 45 years at one specific company. They were loyal. They loved having plaques on their wall. So those are the people who just kind of they really do take pride in a job well done. When it comes to baby boomers, they're not always keen on feedback. It's like, okay, we got this done. Let's continue to move on. So it's like, okay, we don't need to debrief. When we come to Gen Xers, they're pretty direct. They'll come and say like, how am I doing? And that can be a really great thing. It can also be really uncomfortable when it's like, you're doing horrible. You have spent so far 2 weeks planning your wedding on office time, or whatever. And so sometimes the direct approach is really helpful. Sometimes the direct approach is really uncomfortable. But again, that's how they do best. And so everybody needs to sort of learn how to deal with it. Gen Y, they tend to require lots of feedback. Again, they've sort of been thrown out there. So a lot of times, this is, if you're talking about a workplace, this is their first job. They need to be taught how to answer the phone. They need, hi, good morning, Newman County Cooperative Extension, can I help you? I can't tell you how many employees we've had that say, hello. You do not, that's not how you answer a phone in a business. I mean, but so you have to give instructions. You have to spell it all out. And it's not because they're lazy. It's not because that's just how they need to be taught. And also they like feedback instantaneous. Don't wait for a 6-month review and say 3 months ago, this didn't happen. You need to get on it right now and say, hey, thanks for doing that. However, no, we don't use our P card that way, or you have to do it right away. And then when we talk about Generation Z, the most important thing is in real time and bite size. Don't write the book, give them the Sparks note. I mean, don't try to do too much, but do it as quickly and as kind of immediately as you can. And so those tend to be, I think that's the last one. Yes. So those tend to be just some really broad generalizations about the different generations. And so I hope we didn't get too bogged down. I find it super helpful to know my audience, and to anything that will give me tips to figure out how to break through with some of the groups, especially if I have volunteers who are willing to do things on behalf of my organization. It's okay, how do I get the most out of them and let them know that I genuinely appreciate it and hope that they continue to come back. So are we good with multi-generational stuff? Or are you about ready to clock out? If you're ready to clock out, we are in luck, because Beck is going to save us.
Okay, so to transition a little bit, we have our last poll, or not quiz, but poll, and I am very curious to see how this works virtually. I have done this activity many times with large groups when we're all in the same room, and it's a very engaging way to determine interest that people have, and who does, and how many have that. And so if we could start the poll, you're going to have choices, but you're only going to have 2 choices. You have to select one or the other, and I'll be very curious to see how we as a group, what the numbers are in each of these 2 different categories. You can see all that we're going to go through, and you get the choice. So the way this should work is you should be able to vote on whether you're like chocolate or vanilla, and we'll see there's just those 2 choices for chocolate and vanilla.
And Mike, just a heads up, we can only do 10 questions per poll, so this one will be divided up. The first poll will have the first 10, and then we have a second one that'll have the last 5.
Oh, that'll be fine. Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to launch the first 10 now.
Okay. All right. So which one? If you had to choose just one or the other, which one do you choose, chocolate or vanilla? Please choose.
Anybody?
We have 1.
Oh, you have to do the whole thing.
You do the whole thing. Sorry. Yeah. That's
okay. I know we're no one's participating.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, then I realized that must be what it is.
Okay.
So we're at about 21. We have about 30 or 40 more to go. I'll be curious to see how the, one we left off was those that are left-handed and those that are right-handed.
You're right.
Okay, so another couple of seconds and we'll end the polling. Diana says swirl. I'm with you 100%. There's a whole lot more options that could be here, but some of it is you have to choose the lesser of the two, or the one that. So this is just I wanted to do this because I wanted to be able to see some of the interesting facts or the interesting makeup of the group, and let you see the interesting makeup of the group, because I'm assuming that many of you do not know each other. Most do not know each other. I would assume there are some small groups that you may know each other or from previous things. And so from a random group of 70 plus people, what are our breakouts? And so I think we are done. The poll has been complete. So let's just scroll down there and look at that. Is it surprising that almost 2/3 of the group prefers chocolate over vanilla? Not surprising in my opinion. My personal one is vanilla, by the way. So if I'm comparing myself to the rest of the group, I am in the minority. Strong minority of vanilla. Mountains or beach? Most would prefer the beach. Even in Arizona, interesting, most would prefer the beach. Maybe that's why because we don't have a beach, we want to go to the beach. Which one is better, daytime or nighttime? For me, it's interesting that the breakout of some of these. Preference summer or winter? That one I thought would be the opposite, right?
I totally thought the opposite.
I live up in the White Mountains, and so I live at 6,000 foot elevation. I much prefer the summer, but I would assume that most people live in the Phoenix metro, the desert, Yuma, for instance, and I would have thought that they would prefer the winters over the summers. Are you a dog lover or a cat lover? This is the widest discrepancy of any of them. So no, the next one will be as much. Dog lovers are nearly 4-to-1 over cat lovers. Beverages, coffee over Coke by that near same margin. Social media platform. This is pretty revealing, right, Amy?
Yes.
The Facebook versus Instagram can instantly tell us sort of the age or the generation of most of the participants, right?
Yes.
And number 8, operating system, Apple or Macintosh. I think that also is very indicative of the age discrepancy, right?
Yes.
And adventure, parachuting over bungee jumping. It'd be interesting now to follow up with a question about how many people have actually done one or the other of those. We cannot, but if somebody wants to chime in and tell us their experience, if anybody's ever done bungee jumping, I would be curious to know what that felt like as they left the launching pad and jumped freely. And the final one here is water skiing versus snowboarding. Again, about a 2/3 versus 1/3 discrepancy on that. Probably pretty revealing. I would think that falls within the normal range of the climate environment that we have in Arizona. Anybody, any thoughts anybody has on those? You can share in the chat. You can unmute and give your perspective on some of these. I'd love to hear your take on this group and the answer to these first 10 questions, and then we'll do the rest of them. Lots of comments in the chat. Too many of them. I can't keep up with all of those, but if you follow those on the chat, thank you for your participation and your engagement on those.
I think it definitely shows the age group that we're dealing with, because I know my granddaughter would not have chosen any of these. She would certainly have been an Apple person, Instagram, or what is that other, Snapchat. So it definitely shows us the age group of our volunteers.
Great insight. How old is your granddaughter?
She's 17.
Okay. So you're not the opposite of your granddaughter, but there are absolute different likes and dislikes and methods for doing things. Is that a safe way to say it?
Yeah, because seriously, like you were showing just a few minutes ago about Generation Y and Z, you know, they're the digital people. And so everything is pretty much Apple. They don't, you know, iPhones, iPads, you know, they don't use Facebook. They say Facebook's the older generation. So they don't do those kind of things. And so that's why when I looked at this, you can certainly tell the difference. They're nighttime people. You know,
great point. Great
they
point.
would be hiking, you know, so a lot of it shows the age group that we're dealing with.
Right. It is revealing on that. I didn't think of that before we put these either ors together, but as we have gone through this little exercise, it is interesting to be able to make those assumptions or generalities about our group. And one we could have reframed this presentation is to have done this at the very beginning. And then we would have had been more intentional of doing it at the beginning. And then we could have been able to not direct our presentation, but we would have had some results with which we could have referred back to during our presentation about the differences in the generations, for instance, and how we presented that. And so we had a different perspective in that we wanted to do this at the end to let people, having gone through our presentation, to now look at what some of the other people in the group have been listening to and chatting, what they felt was this group is. And so we had an intentional thing, but in retrospect, we could have done it the opposite and used some of these polls throughout our presentation to prove to some degree our discussion or presentation on the different generations. And as we relate that back to how to wow, the more you know about those, your coworkers, and the more you're intentional about some of those things, the more effective you can be in creating that environment to be successful. Unless anybody has anything else to say or add to these first 10, I'm very curious about the next 10. So if we could share the next 5 questions. And
Mike,
yes,
there's always exceptions to those rules, because I'm 72 years old and I have everything that Apple makes. Yesterday, I got a new modem and Wi-Fi system and I had to change 23 passwords.
Oh my gosh, Judy.
I love technology.
Yeah.
See, we're so glad that you said that. You're right. There's always, nothing is absolute. So
thank you for sharing. That is absolutely true. All right, if we could have the next poll. There we go. All right. Vote on these. I think on those first 10, the closest we had from an even split was 59 to 41%.
probably.
We can have a long discussion about the differences to some of these things. Okay, we have more than half have voted.
72%.
Getting closer. And we are about done. Okay, so the last 5 were big city, small town. That's not obviously necessary from where we're from, but that's what you prefer. My guess is some of you who live in a big city would prefer to live in a small town and vice versa. Just an interesting thing there. Condiments on a mayo or mustard. I would have thought mayo would have been more popular than mustard, but Amy, they all follow your lead on that one. We'll go better with the burger, French fries, or onion rings. And the last one, or the favorite green, kale or spinach. If anybody ever really had kale and enjoyed it, no, I'm
Kale, yeah.
I'm just teasing. We grew some kale as a demonstration in our little extension garden here. And the kale, we waited too long to pick it. So my first experience with kale was that it was really overripe and bitter. And so since then, I have made inappropriately fun of kale and how bitter it really is. But that's just my own personal one. And books or movies, that's the closest one yet. I prefer a book, but many prefer movies. Great. Any insight, any comments on some of these, either in the chat for the group, or anybody like to unmute and share some observations?
I will say one way that Mike is the mastermind when it comes to like all of these interactive things. And generally, especially if we have kids, one way that he does things like this in order to show like how we have similarities, or even sometimes if you're needing to split groups up and you want it to be an equal group, he'll have everybody get on the bus. And so everybody stands in a straight line. And then he'll say, okay, right side of the bus is chocolate, left side of the bus. And so everyone just takes a step. And it's a fun way to get everybody out of their chair, kids who don't know each other, adults who don't know each other. Like, okay, what side of the bus are you sitting on? There's no right side, just get on the dang bus, you know? And so, again, it does show a lot of generational differences, sometimes just with the questions. But again, sometimes it's just a silly way to get everybody up and to figure out, hey, we have a lot more in common than we don't.
So I'd share with that story. We were doing something with about 40 young people, and we got them all on the bus, all in a line. And I can't even remember the question it was, but literally one young person stepped to the left based on their answer, and the other 39 stepped to the other side. And so it was a great dialogue and a great conversation regarding peer pressure, regarding your conviction, and regarding how you are perceived. And it changed the whole dynamic of our program, because it went in a different direction than what we had anticipated. And it all came about from this one person staying true to their conviction and stepping to the left. And everybody on the right was impressed and wanted to know why they did that and what their conviction was on that thing, which led to, like I said, a whole lot more dialogue on a program that we were working on. And so since then, I have had a particular affinity to this particular activity. I've never done it on Zoom. Yes, we get some overall percentages, but it does take away from our personal ability to personalize it or look across the room and have a dialogue on why you stepped the way you did and what it meant to you. And if we're invited back next year and this is a live in-person training, I would do the same activity with a group and do more questions than what goes on a burger, what goes on, what color do you like? We could ask some more engaging, specific type questions that get a response, and then create a conversation about those things. It's a great way to introduce that. And I just wanted to share the follow-up to that story that Amy said. Thanks, Amy.
Sorry, I probably just stepped on your portion.
No.
Okay.
We're good.
So really, thank you everybody for participating in the polls. We're just gonna wrap up so we have time for questions. And what we're sort of most looking forward to is we do have quite a few resources that we wanna share. Let me advance this. I just wanted to, according to Forbes magazine, I thought this was really interesting and time appropriate. Organizations utilizing multi-generations are at a major advantage. They said having an open and candid conversation about the benefits that come from multi-generationalism makes everyone feel more comfortable voicing their needs and concerns. So again, even Forbes magazine is sort of praising the organizations who really embrace multi-generationalism. So there's no time like the present to embrace everybody. So now to the resources. I think what we're going to be doing is, Emily or Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, we can just drop a file into the chat box. Is that the easiest? Okay, so, but before we do that, because we know as soon as we do that, adults are the worst students, everybody will click and open and you're already into it before we explain. So we just kind of wanted to explain a couple of things. But before we do that, we sort of want to make sure that we have given you what we thought we were going to give you. Our goal in How to Wow was like to make sure that we are valuing people for their contributions. And the most important thing is intentionality is a very important thing, especially to Mike and I. So to be intentional and engaging with whatever you're doing, whatever project, whatever group of people you're working with. So hopefully we've sort of given you ways in which you can learn to value or show that you value. And then also some new ideas and resources to take back. And so that's where the next couple of slides come in. So we have a couple different types. These are called mind benders. And so what we will give, what will be in some of the resources are, so like, let's look, let's pick one. I don't know if you can see, it says raisin. Like, what do you guys think this could be? Anybody?
Somebody in the chat said raisin in the sun.
Amy, got it, nailed it. So these are just sort of little mind benders that like you can have at the beginning of a staff meeting, maybe just do one or two. And so, yeah, the answers are on the left, which are helpful, but the ones that we're gonna be giving you, let me make sure I can advance this. Oh, we will give you ones with the answer and then ones that are blank so that you don't have to like go through and white out everything. And there's nothing worse than somebody giving you an empty one without the answers. And so we try to be very deliberate and make it as helpful as possible. So we'll give you some, I think there's like 8 or 9 of these. Also just lists of faves. There's lots of different ways that you can incorporate asking people some of their favorite things, learning a lot about different people by doing that. Just simple ways of like, which superpower would you have? It doesn't matter which they pick. It's just, again, another way. And so all of these are handouts and it has an explanation and why each one means what it does. So if I ask like, oh, I would want X-ray vision. Oh, cool. X-ray vision means you like to see through problems. And so again, it's just sort of a longer version of some of the cocology ones that Mike was doing. Another favorite, I love this. I especially do this with kids because they tell me what their favorite snack, they tell me what they like and what they don't like. And so sometimes all year long, I'll walk around with a little handful of things like, don't buy Dr. Pepper, nobody drinks sodas anymore. And, you know, and so sometimes I get so much information about the groups I'm working with just from little things like this. This, especially before COVID, like put a thing of lifesavers in a bowl, have everybody pick 2. And instead of saying like, okay, Mike, stand up, tell us 2 things about yourself. Hi, I'm Mike. Just a little fun tip about Mike. Mike has hiked the Grand Canyon 21 times. So it's really easy in his intro to say he likes to hike the Grand Canyon. No, he's hiked it 21 times. Like that's a big deal. And so again, this is another way of helping people figure out like maybe a couple of things to talk about. So if they grab a yellow, something they hate to shop for, gas. Who likes to shop for gas? Nobody. But this is again another way of helping people introduce new things about themselves to a group of people. Oh, here's the blank one. I don't know why it was out of order, but that was my fault. And so I think that's it. So while Mike will handle questions, is that cool, Mike? And I'm going to shuffle. Yeah, Mike's great at questions. Well, I'm going to shuffle the handout into the, and I hope this works. I've never tried this, so.
I haven't been following in chat if there are any questions. If somebody has been following that and wants to relay a question, or if anybody has any questions or comments, we'd love to field them, have them, hear them, and thank you for your involvement today, and we hope that you enjoyed it and got something out of it.
So the number one question I am seeing in the chat, Amy and Mike, is that the presentation is fantastic and they are wondering how they can access this later. We will, we have been recording the session today, and we will have that up on our governor's office website for about 4 weeks following the summit, so that folks can rewatch or download and be able to access that later. And we can also make the slides available, of course, with permission from our host. So that's the one question I'm seeing in the chat box the most. And then Jamie, it looks like you have unmuted and you have a question.
Oops, I'm sorry, no, I'm not. I don't have a question, sorry.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
Maybe we have a question for you. No, I'm teasing.
From New Jersey, I have lots of answers.
Because New Jerseyans are always asking questions. That's why you have answers.
We have people.
Ah. Well said. Well said. There's a lot more resources that we put in there, I believe, Amy, than we just gave a brief overview of some of those resources. There's a lot of other resources that are in there.
The way I uploaded it, it all did them individually. So I don't know if that's too confusing. So I'm not sure what the easiest way to share those are, but I think I speak for Mike and I both. We'd be more than happy to share our slides. And if you need specific, yes, please email us. We'd love to be able to share.
I really enjoyed looking at it, and what I really enjoyed a lot of was bringing more insight onto the different generations, because I think it was so spot on, and just knowing how to, especially if you've got volunteers or you're bringing volunteers in, you really do need to know how they relate as well as how to relate to them. And I really appreciate just kind of bringing a lot of it into perspective, because just looking at it, it helps me so much to understand how they communicate as far as the way I communicate.
Thank you. That honestly, that we just want to be a resource, and really, Mike and I have a lot of experience working with a vast majority of age groups, and so some of our frustrations have led to solutions on our counterparts for for our coworkers, and so if we can help, having already figured out what has worked for us, then really volunteers, our organization could not work without volunteers. And so it's just so critically important to meet them where they're at. And
my biggest thing, my biggest thing is, I'm so used to the phone. That's the generation I'm in. And I will text someone, that's fine. But a whole conversation on a text, it's like, that's just to sit here and type all that. I could go to the phone, get the conversation over and be done, And so it does help me, to be able to understand a whole lot better.
Well, good.
I laugh at that, Kathy, because I have a son-in-law who will hold conversations and write paragraphs texting, and I'll text a one-word answer or just 3 words, and if he keeps coming back with more and more of a paragraph, I'll just pick up the phone and call him and say, let's just talk about this. And he understands that, and I understand that. So we have met in the middle on how we deal with some of the communication, because he has his method and I have mine, and we work it out.
Great, thank you.
I was just going to say too, though, I think you guys also did a great job of not saying, disparaging any of the different communication styles either on that kind of topic, because I think that's often the case in sessions that kind of discuss that. It's like, well, these, the kids today, or, that it's, there's a right or a wrong way. And I think, you just did a great job of saying, no, it's just different. And exactly, we can meet in the middle on different things. It's not a right or wrong type of communication.
That's true.
Thank you.
This has been a wonderful session. I have absolutely loved every second of it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next year, if it's in person, we have some additional resources and some additional ways to engage and to move this to additional levels. But that's all contingent upon in person. I enjoy the new methods because it's challenged me to present in different ways. And so I very much appreciate your kind comments and insight. And thank you very much.
I see really quick. Nicole has asked a question. Do we have time for a question really quick, Emily, or no?
Yeah, I was just going to say Nicole had put that question into the chat box. If you want to address that.
One of the way, her question is, what's the best way to get Gen Z to respond, even to emails? Or I have found they don't tend to respond to emails, but I have a love for teens. I don't know why. I will make excuses for them all day long. But so generally what I do is I work with teens who are in a leadership program. And so they know, I don't care what they respond, but they have to respond. A thumbs up, a gotcha, or whatever, I'll be there. If they don't respond, something gets taken away. And like for me, I take away a speaking part. And so 10 kids are standing up there and one kid doesn't have a speaking part, and everybody on the team says, why didn't so-and-so get his part? And I said, I never heard back from them. So they can, so generally, and even if it's work, like I will gladly, somebody at work isn't getting a group. If you don't have the courtesy to respond, and I'm pretty direct, like I have very little expectations except for to communicate. That is your get out of jail free card. All you have to do is write back. And so I find I hate to call it a penalty, but something that will really sort of hit them. And with me, it tends to be speaking parts. And again, it's public, it's in front of everybody. Sometimes their parents are there and their parents say, hey, why didn't so-and-so have a speaking part? They don't communicate. And they will be the first responders from then on. So, I hate to say that, but sometimes maybe connect it with a little bit of a consequence, and that changes their tune pretty quickly. So
I call it a natural outcome.
Right. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I call that a natural outcome. Touching a hot stove, getting burned.
Yeah.
Right. My point was Amy knows her group and knows her group well, and knows has become very intentional, knows what she wants, what she expectations are, and how to get those expectations. So some of it is know your group and know how they will respond or know what they want, and then work to create that incentive or that thing that will get them to connect back.
And especially with Zoom schools and like virtual learning, they have specifically told me email means school. So they're not checking email at all. So I know the only way that I can get in touch with them is texting, or sometimes like I will creep on their Instagram page and say, hey, what's the deal? Like the application is due this week. So, but really they've told me anything that I get from school, they email me. So they've turned off of email even more so since quarantine and virtual learning. So, and again, like we have to meet, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just, we have to meet them where they're at. And so that would be my biggest tip, is just keep trying. But really, like Carol said, if there's a consequence, sometimes that's the best lesson. So, okay.
Let's give one big round of applause to Amy and Mike. You can use that reaction button there. I think they did a wonderful job presenting to us. I loved Ashley's feedback about how open and accepting everything is. There's no one right or wrong way. There just is the way that people communicate, and how do we take time to make sure everybody understands how the different communication styles are, and then try and meet each other in the middle when we can. So thank you very much, Amy and Mike.